Thanks for tuning in to the Joined Up Writing Podcast, a weekly show about all things writing, including author interviews, hints, tips, and story readings. You can follow us on Twitter at JU Podcast, leave a quick iTunes review, or just tell a friend. Let's get joined up. Hello and welcome to the Joined Up Writing Podcast, where a little procrastination can go a long way. I'm Wayne Kelly.
And I'm Leah Osborne.
And this is episode 48, and today we're lucky enough to have writer Patsy-Collins on the show. Patsy's got loads of experience with long and short fiction, and she's also just released an excellent book packed full of useful writing advice. And we'll also have tweets of the week. But just before that, let's have a quick catch up. So how's your writing been going this week, Leah? I know you were struggling a little bit last week. Has it looked up, or is it pretty much more of the same?
No, it's pretty much the same. I've had a bit more time, like at the beginning of where are we now? Yeah, so at the beginning of last week, I had a little bit more time that I proceeded to waste because I was exhausted, and I'm conscious that the deadline for me submitting this 5,000 words is coming closer and closer, so there's been no fresh writing. I've been using my time to edit those 5,000 words before I send it off, but it's so slow because I just can't get my head in the game. So, yeah, I feel like I'm stumbling and falling a lot rather than what used to be my big list of weekly achievements.
Well, actually, when we get to it later on, one of the tweets of the week that I've got talks about this very thing. But I think, don't be too hard on yourself. If you're editing anyway, you've got to focus. If you haven't got, especially if you've got other things going on in your life and everything else, the time of the year is not brilliant. Obviously, it's short days, it's cold, it's busy on the run up to Christmas and all that kind of thing. And just focus on the priorities. If the priority is getting that 5,000 words thing out, then that's what your focus needs to be. And when you get that out, focus on the fact that you've done that. So
you sound just like Dave. I'll take that.
Well, yeah,
that's
definitely.
very much what he's been saying to me.
Definitely, because I'm similar. I haven't done any new words on the novel this week at all. Not a sausage. No excuses. No excuses. Just haven't really buckled down to it to get it done. But I have been busy doing stuff for the podcast, trying to get new interviews lined up, and also I did come up with another idea for a blog, and I've been drafting that, and that's nearly finished. That's yeah. So I've been doing the blog is about one of my favourite characters, crime novel characters, and sort of linking it to my own protagonist. Are you familiar with, I think we've probably talked about it on the podcast before, but a character called Parker, and in crime novels written by Richard Stark, kind of from the 50s onwards. There's been a few films made using the same character. Is he
the singing one? He's not the singing detective, is he?
No, he's not. No. Well,
okay.
I recommend
maybe not then.
Well, the author's actual name is Donald E. Westlake, but he wrote under a pseudonym, Richard Stark, and he had this character Parker, which was going to be a one-off.
Is he from Winterfell?
Yeah, it was going to be a one-off character, but then he ended up writing like 21 novels or whatever. But it was kind of I stumbled on it fairly late, quite recently, and it was one of the things that kind of inspired me to write my novel and the character that I've got, because I kind of wanted to do my own kind of take on it. Cool. So that's what I'm linking back to. So that's been good. But yeah, no actual new words or anything like that. So, but maybe
writing isn't just writing, is it? There's lots of things that go into writing, and that really is the truth.
Yeah, and all the the stuff going on in the back brain and trying to think of stuff. I've got to try and do some new words or something for the critique group this week, even if it's just dig out one of my old stories to edit or something. So I don't
even know if I'm going to make that. Oh gosh, I hope I can.
Yeah, hopefully. Well, some of these things are some of the things we're going to be talking about with Patsy, because I know that the book that she's just released or co-authored, I've been reading that, and that's got some great tips. So probably now is just as good a time as any to introduce this week's guest.
Segway!
Segway alert.
Skillfully done this time. Well done.
Yeah. Thank you. I was lucky enough to speak to Patsy a couple of days ago, so here's our chat. Okay, I think it's time we introduce this week's special guest, which is Patsy Collins. So she's the author of 4 novels, 3 contemporary romances and 1 coming-of-age story with a difference. She's written hundreds of short stories and they've been published in magazines in the UK, Australia, Sweden, Ireland and South Africa. And as well as fiction, Patsy writes articles for Writing Magazine. She gives occasional writing workshops and talks and runs 2 writing blogs, which include tons of advice on succeeding in the women's magazine market, links to writing competitions and other useful advice. She co-runs Writing Chat, the weekly writing tweet up, which both myself and Leah attend whenever we can. And, as if that wasn't enough, she's also co-authored From Story Idea to Reader, a non-fiction book that's got loads of help and advice for writers new and experienced. So it's yet another busy lady onto the podcast. Patsy, welcome to Joined Up Writing.
Thank you very much for inviting me.
No, it's great to have you on. So just start off, for people that don't know, we'll start off, I mentioned the book From Story Idea to Reader, which I've just started reading. I'm a few chapters in and it's really, really interesting. So maybe just give us a bit of an overview of that first of all. What made you want to write that book? Tell us who you wrote it with and a little bit more about that.
Well, I wrote it with Rosemary Kind from Alfie Dog Fiction. We've known each other virtually for about 9 years. We've sort of helped each other, given feedback and things like that. And I was in at the start when she launched Alfie Dog. And I happened to mention on one of these groups that I quite like the idea of doing a non-fiction book. My husband had actually suggested it after I did the articles, but I didn't think I could do the whole thing. And she straight away came back and said, well, funny you should say that. I've been feeling a bit the same way. And as soon as we got together and looked at, what we would like to do and whether either of us could do it, it suddenly seemed like a really good project.
Yeah, well, it's really good. I like the style of it. I mean, I like all the stuff that I mentioned to you before in our email correspondence. But right at the beginning of the book, you start off talking about all these different ways that you can generate ideas, because obviously you get lots of people, and when it comes to writing an article or a short story or a novel idea or whatever, a lot of the time people are like, well, I just don't know where to start with the creative process, or I need to bang out a short story or whatever. And just that, I think, is it 101 idea? I don't know how you phrase it now, but it's 101 ideas, ways you can come up with ideas for stories and things.
Places to find them. I think that people have ideas, they just don't realise that those ideas are story ideas. You see somebody walk by and you think, I wonder where they're going, why they're wearing that hat, or just anything, and you don't realise that's an idea. That could be a story. So it's to point out that ideas are everywhere.
It's questions, isn't it? That's kind of the theme that I picked up from that particular section. I mean, most of the time it is asking that extra question, why is that like that? Or what if is another one, isn't it? What if that looks like that's happening, but what if this happened instead, or whatever, or changing POV. There's loads of really, really practical ideas in there. But I like the style of the book anyway. The way that you've written it is almost like a conversation. As you say, there's kind of big sections. I don't know kind of how you arranged or how you organised when you wrote the book, but it seems like one of you has taken one chapter and another one's taken another chapter, but then you'll kind of chip in. One of you will chip in during that chapter just with like a little aside. Yeah, well, you could do it like that, or you could also look at it this way, or remember not to do it like this, which is kind of feels like you almost like you're listening to 2 writers having a conversation or something, but it's kind of really accessible, I thought.
Yeah, it was like a conversation as we were writing it as well. Some bits were obvious because I do the Womagwriter blog and I've written lots of short stories for women's magazines. It seemed fairly obvious I would do that because Rosemary has done publishing. It seemed obvious she would do that. But sometimes we would have questions, or we'd ask each other questions as we were going through, and we thought, well, the reader will want to know the answer to that as well. So we put the questions and the answers in.
So what was that kind of the main idea with the book? Did you want it to be, because it does have kind of quite a practical feel to it, the book. It does seem to be, because you've also got exercises at the end of each section that suggest. Tell me a little bit about that. Why did you want to approach it like that?
Well, we can help. Anybody can give advice on how to write, or to give you grammar tips. But you have to do the writing. There is no shortcut. You have to do the writing, and we wanted to to make people see, yeah, we can give you this advice, but the advice won't help you unless you sit down and write a story and use that advice in the story. So we wanted, the exercise is to remind people that the reason they're reading the book is to write, not just to read a book.
Yeah, because I think it's fair to say, I'm guessing you're the same, most of us writers do like to read about writing as much as we like to write. And so we do like sometimes I think we it's almost like a different kind of procrastination, and we can justify it because it's about writing. So it's nice to actually have little prompts to say, well, why don't you go out and try this exercise and actually get doing it. But you look at all sorts of different things, so just list off a few of the different things, because I know I mentioned the idea section. I know you look at kind of real nuts and bolts things like POV and things, which again some people find difficult. So tell us some of the kind of chapter headings and some of the things that you look at.
We've done everything from there's dialogue, finding titles, character names, just the choice of language that you use, how to self-publish, tax returns for when you made a lot of money, but also the very basic stuff. I mean, people seem to think, I need to build a platform and I've got to get contacts and I need a top-of-the-range computer and stuff, and they forget, no, just grab a pen and a paper and start writing. You can't do anything with your writing until you've got some writing. So although everything else is important, the writing is the main thing, which we've tried to remind people of as they go through. But there's loads of other bits to it as well. We've done bits on blogging. We've mentioned writing chat, because it can be a bit lonely sometimes writing. The need to get feedback and connect with other writers. So we tried to think of all the stuff. Rosemary's been writing all her life. For me, I only started about 15 years ago. So I've tried to think about what I would have liked to have known when I started, what would have helped me. And rather than loads of technical stuff, we've gone through the things you should look at. And some people think, that's fine, I can spell, I don't need to worry about that bit. But other things, you might look at the story arc, I don't get that, I don't understand it. So we can't do everything, 5 chapters on every subject. So it's pointers of where to look. We've given reference ideas where you can look for other things as well.
No, it's really good. Well, you mentioned there about how long you've been writing. So tell us a little bit about your writing journey. How did you come to writing? Was it something that you always did from a young age? Why did you get into writing?
It was a bit of an accident, really. I'd moved to a new area and I was living on my own and I didn't have any money, so I wanted something that would fill time. And I happened to get a leaflet for evening classes, and I could just about afford one. And there was a wine tasting. I could afford the class, but not the wine. There was one on. I can't remember. There was one on family history, I think, that was full. Local history that was full, and I thought that would have been interesting, but couldn't do it. And creative writing. So I thought, oh well, I like stories. I love reading. I've always loved reading. I thought, well, that'd be a laugh. I'll go to that. And it was really good fun. But the tutor encouraged us to submit right from the start. And one of the first things we did was a local competition, 40-word story. And I thought, I can manage 40 words. And I won. And I won cake, tea and cake with the mayor, and book tokens. So I was pretty hooked from then.
So that was it. So that was your first. So you struck gold straight away. So with as regards that, because I know that you are, I know from your blogs and from when you speak on writing chat and different things, you are really, really big on submitting, getting your work out there, entering competitions and publication and everything else. Was that something? Was it as a direct result of that original thing with your tutor and sort of encouraging you? Because some people are really reticent to do it. They'll write for years and years and years and years before they get the courage to actually send something out.
Yeah, I think in some ways I was lucky. I was encouraged to do it before I was ready, but that meant I was encouraged to do it before I realised how hard it was and before I'd got nervous. So I'd already sent some out, not expecting any result, and I got rejection slips, as you not be surprised to hear. But they didn't hurt. I didn't really know what I was doing, so I'd started to get them. So once you've had a few more don't hurt so much. And then, of course, when I got the first one, I thought I'd made it. That was the worst shock, I think. that selling one story, every story is on its own. It doesn't matter how many you've sold. If they don't like the next one, they won't buy it.
Yeah, for sure. So how do you, in those instances, how do you stay positive? How do you stave off the dreaded self-doubt?
Well, when I first started sending out and getting, apart from I was lucky with that competition, I was doing a lot of letters to these dodgy household tips and things like that. And although they're nothing like selling a short story, it's really motivating if somebody will pay you for writing something, and that sort of encouraged me. But one of the hardest things was, at one point, everything I'd sent out had to come back. And that was really, really demoralising. And after that, I made a point of always having a lot of stuff out there. And if quite a lot have come back, keep sending it. So, the next post, the next email could be an acceptance. And eventually that did pay off.
Yeah, you're not the first. There's a lady that's in our critique group that's had years and years and years of experience of submitting. And that's one of her things, is like always have. I think she's kind of... her rule that she has for herself is something like she always has at least 6 pieces of work out at any time. So as soon as one comes back, she'll send it. If she gets a rejection, she just sends another one out there or whatever. And so you've kind of always got something out there in the ether. Would that be, would that be one of your tips for submitting? Yeah,
definitely. And you might target one. It is a good idea to target one market, especially with the magazines, because you'll research it and find out what they want. So that might be your main focus. But that doesn't mean you can't try a few others, maybe go for a competition, try something completely different as well. Because especially when you're first writing, you don't really know what you're good at and what you're going to like doing. So it's good to try lots of different things, and that increases your chances of success as well.
Definitely. Well, as you say, one of your blogs is specifically focused on the women's magazine market. So how did you, apart from being a woman and reading magazines presumably at some stage, how did you why did that sort of become one of your main areas of focus? And how did you become so successful at it? You mentioned there briefly research. What other things do people need to bear in mind with that?
Well, the blog itself was actually started by Kath McGirl. And it was reading that blog and getting the advice that got me started on blogging. And when she became much more successful with her novels and was unable to continue with the Womagwriter blog, I took that over. So I had a head start. I was already up and running there. Right, I started writing them because that's what I like reading. And I'm lucky the things I naturally want to write are very similar to the types of things in the Womag writing. But I would say read the magazines, pick the one that you like best, the stories you like reading best, because it takes quite a long time to write stories. You've got to keep working on them. You should do the type of thing you want to do. I've come across people that think women's magazine stories are rubbish or twee or trivial. If you feel like that, don't try writing them. It won't be any fun and you won't be successful. Write the things you do want to. But if you do want to, read the magazine, find the one that suits your style best. Keep reading the stories so you get an idea of the tone and the sort of things they do and don't have. And just write lots of stories. Keep writing them. Get feedback. Join a critique group. It can be online if you can't do it physically. Preferably with people writing the same genre as you. I'm lucky that I belong to 2 critique groups like that, and they're very, very helpful. Just keep trying. As I said earlier, every story stands on its own. The fact that they've, you sent them one, they didn't like it, that doesn't mean they won't like the next one. But don't flood them. If you send 20 stories, the chances are you may have made the same mistake in another one. And also, they're never going to buy 20 from the same person at once. So spread them out a bit and keep working on them.
And how important is it to kind of make relationships, kind of build relationships with these these people? Because presumably, I appreciate, obviously, to a certain extent, commission editors or whatever, they come and they go. But how important have you found that? Have you been able to build a rapport with certain editors over a period of time?
You do to some extent, because you're emailing them and things, but people do see the same names and they think, oh, they're in with that magazine, they're friends with them. The same people only get the stories in because they're writing the kind of thing that the magazine likes. It doesn't matter, if you knew them personally, it wouldn't help. I know some of the editors have said, particularly Women's Weekly, have said that quite famous authors have written stories for them, and although they're great stories, they don't suit the magazine, so they're unable to publish them. So you get a relationship because you're selling the stories to the magazine rather than the other way around. You don't need to know them, and I didn't know any editors, anything about them when I first started writing. So that's just something that comes. But you do need to build a relationship with other writers to get feedback. I think that's very important.
Yeah, definitely. And presumably, so in terms of, because we're talking about short fiction now, obviously with women's magazines, different bits and pieces, but you have written, it's 4 novels, isn't it? So tell me, sorry.
Only 4 are published.
Yeah, sorry. Yeah, that's not the first time somebody said that on the podcast. That seems to be, the usual thing. It's usually the, was that your first novel? No, it was my first published novel. But yeah, so you've had 4 novels published. So when did you decide that you were going to try novels, or were you trying to write novels right from the get-go, or how did that work?
No, the first novel I finished writing was Paint Me a Picture. That was an accident as well. There's a bit of a theme here. I wrote a short story and it just didn't end. And when it was about 83,000 words, I started to realise it wasn't a short story and maybe I should find an ending to it. I never sit down and think I want to write a novel. I get an idea and I realise it's not a short story. And gradually that evolves into a novel.
Yeah. So, did you? How did you find the process though? Do you think, again, because it was like, as you say, an accident, and you kind of fell into it, so you didn't really have too much time to sort of worry about it, or was it a case of you thought, oh my God, I've got to write, X 10,000s of words or whatever it was? Did you find there was a big difference between the two, or was it? Yeah. It was just you slipped into it kind of thing.
Well, that first one, it took me 10 years to write because I kept adding to it and trying to get to the end, because I hadn't intended to set out to write a novel. I hadn't planned it or anything, and I eventually did get to the end and I edited it and I cut out 40,000 words and completely rewrote it, and I'm happy with it now, but I don't advise people who want to write a novel to set out that way. The next time I started working on something, I thought this might turn into a novel. I stopped and planned it a bit. I'm not much of a planner at all, but I did sort of think, right, this might be the end, and this is where it'll start, and I'll need this many words, and things will happen in between, which is about as much planning as I do. But I wouldn't advise just starting a novel and intending to write a novel and just writing. I would plan it a bit.
Yeah, well, I noticed in the from story idea to reader, I noticed that you and Rosemary have kind of both got slightly different approaches from what you say. So as you say, yeah, well, it depends. We've had this argument many a time, myself and Leah, and with various guests. We've had this conversation. I think it's probably just everyone's got their own way of doing it. But I know Rosemary is much more of she likes to plan and she likes to properly have things. She needs to have a clear idea of where she's going. And you sound a little bit more like how I work, which is your idea of a plan is almost kind of chapter headings with a few lines of description. I know probably a little bit more than that, but that's the kind of essence of it. And that's pretty much that I find that myself. I mean, I really have tried to do it the other way as well, to try and avoid heartache and going down dead ends and all that kind of thing, and not have to do massive rewrites and loads of editing. But it just doesn't suit me. I tend to find that I write the life out of it when I'm drafting it. If I do that, when I try to write a very detailed outline, I just find, I'm bored of this. By the time it comes to actually sitting down and starting the novel, I've got a really clear idea of where every single thing's going, but it's not so much fun to write. But I don't know, why do you think that you do it the way that you do, or don't you stop to question it? You just get on with it?
Yeah, I'm not. Partly because several of mine have been romances, and because that's emotion and character led, you have to write your way into it a bit and get to know the characters before they know, you know what they're going to be doing. Whereas if it was a complicated crime novel or something, you would probably have to plot it a bit more for it to make any sense. But no, I suppose I treat each chapter a bit like a short story. When I start writing those, I usually just got a few details and I know roughly where I think it's going to end, but I make most of it up as I go along. So I tend to do the same with the novel to some extent.
And how do you approach? So you mentioned that's because that's a good tip. Looking at a chapter as if each one is almost like a little short story. So you look at it presumably like it has to have some kind of beginning, a middle, and some kind of resolution. When you're going through that original stage, or maybe you do it when you're editing, do you look at like what each scene or each chapter is supposed to be doing, kind of thing? What is it, moving the plot along, or is it telling you something about the character? How do you approach that?
I do when I'm doing my chapter plan at the beginning, and I update that as I go along. I sort of put the key thing that happens under each chapter heading, and that does at least hopefully mean that something does happen, because it's actually, I don't know if you found it yourself, but it's quite easy to write 3,000 words where nothing actually happens.
yeah, it is.
Yeah, that's happened. I can tell the laugh.
Yeah, it has. Yeah.
So that is good, because if you break it down and think, right, what really happened here, you have to look and see whether anything did. And I also look at which characters are there to make sure nobody disappears for too long, or you have to remind readers about them if they haven't appeared for a while.
Yeah, well, I've got that issue at the moment with the first draft that I'm writing. I'm quite near the end, and I'd written a few chapters and then realised that 2 characters had literally disappeared. It's never explained what happened to them. Something I've got to sort out in the edit. But yeah, it's quite easy to do, because especially if you're in something where there's a lot of action or there's lots of stuff that needs to happen with specific characters, it's quite easy to get for other characters to get left behind. And then you start asking yourself, well, did they need to be in that scene in the first place, or did they, so that's quite.
I can melt down a couple of characters and make one.
Yeah, absolutely, yeah. Well, I know that a lot of people, when true stories get adapted for books or particularly for films, this happens quite a lot, because obviously in real life characters, you have a certain amount of real characters, and they were involved in something for whatever reason in a real life event. But then when it comes to writing the screenplay for it or the book, essentially, those 3 characters could all be covered off by one character. That one character does what those 3 characters do. So it's kind of, as you say, you can get everything much tighter, can't you, and refine it. So what about your actual process then? So do you, because just from reading your bio and seeing all the stuff that you've kind of got out there, it's obvious that you are productive, you're a busy person. So do you treat it like a 9-to-5 job, or do you have a set, have you got set hours that you work best? Tell me a little bit about your actual process.
Well, it depends. I don't know if we've got to a camper van bit, but my husband and I have a camper van, so we travel quite a lot. So I've got 2 ways of working, when I'm at home or when I'm in the van. But I tend to write better in the morning, I think. Or that's when I do it. I like to sort of get a draft done. So my normal plan is to get a bit of a draft done in the morning. it might only be sort of 20 minutes sketch out an outline, or it might be going really well and I'll write a first draft of a whole story or a whole chapter. And then depending if we're away, then I'll go and look around a castle or go to the beach or something. But if we're home and working, then in the afternoon I do the submission stuff, or go through and edit what I've written, or formatting and that kind of thing.
So so to a certain extent it depends on obviously where you are and what you're working on at any given time. So do you set yourself targets for amount of words, or is it amount of time, or are you fairly fluid about the whole thing?
I've got, you can't see it, but I've got a big pile of paper on my desk with month headings, and on each month I've got the titles of magazines I'd like to submit to, any competitions I want to enter, things like that, and then I will fill in story titles of I'll fill in the story titles if it's something I've already got written, and there'll be big blanks where I can see ahead, right, that I've got nothing for that magazine for the next 3 months. So I'll look at that and see what I need to do. That sort of gives me my own deadlines, that I feel that I must have so many spaces filled in, or I haven't really been working. I'm lucky that I write full time, but I do need to get work done, so I do need to motivate myself to some extent and treat it a bit like a job. But I still only do what I really want to do. Yeah,
well, that's part of the joy of being able to do it, though, isn't it? It's choosing things that you want to do and what that you're motivated to work on. So you don't ever sit down and think, right, now I've got to write 500 words or 1,000 words, or it tends to be, well, I've just got this list of things to do and I've got to get cracking with it.
Yeah, I don't tend to keep it so much in how many words. I'll think, right, I want something for that magazine or that competition or whatever, and I do it as a stage. So, I'll write an idea, and even if I've only written 5 lines, but it is an idea, then I've done something towards that. So I'm all right. I can kind of cup of tea or whatever. But no, I don't have word counts. I keep records of story titles I've written, or articles I've written, or chapter headings, because the number of words, you can't sell X number of words. You can sell a story or a book or a article. So it's unfinished pieces, I count it.
Yeah, so you look at it like that. So in terms of like the women's magazines, you mentioned there about you don't tend to think about word counts and things. You tend to think of a story, but I know a lot of those with the magazine market, they, depending on which title you're going for, they do have fairly strict word counts, don't they?
Yeah,
so
very much so.
And presumably, well, I know, again, it's not something that I haven't really submitted to those kind of magazines, but I know a lot of them do have kind of very specific things you can and can't do, or that they will take. You can touch on this subject, but not only in this way, and that kind of thing.
Yeah, and some won't take first person and all sorts of things like that. What I tend to do is I'll get an idea, I'll do a quick draft. I'm really bad when I get an idea. I do not know whether it's going to be a novel or a 700-word story. So I do a quick draft. I can't work that out. I don't know, but I'll do a quick draft. When I've done that, I've got an idea what length it will be, what type of story it is, and then I'll look at. All right, that's going to be around 2000. These markets, those magazines will take that type of story. Which is it closest to suiting? And I've got, I know the magazines quite well now, so I can work that out. So I'll think, right, okay, that would suit Women's Weekly, probably. So then when I go through the second and third drafts, I'm then writing that story for Women's Weekly or Take a Break or whoever it happens to be. So then I will have that in mind as I'm editing it, or it needs to be a little bit longer, a little bit shorter. So that defines how I do the second and third drafts.
So then it tends to be when you're redrafting that you kind of mould them to what they need to be a little bit more and give them a little bit more focus. And what about the non-fiction writing? Obviously, we mentioned the book, but I know you also write articles for things like Writing Magazine and things like that. How did that come about? Was that just a case of you thought, well, I can, adapt these blog posts, or they approached you? How did that come about?
No, I contact the editor when I've got an idea. Just with the very sort of rough what I'd like to do, how I would approach it, how many words roughly I think it would be. And the first few, obviously, when he didn't know me at all, I explained who I was, why I thought I'd be a good person to write that. And then he'll come back and say either no thank you or yes. Sometimes he'll ask me to, angle it in a particular way. He might suggest the word length, that he would like it shorter or longer that I've suggested. Then I write it.
That's good, and that must be quite a good feeling when you because presumably that was a magazine that you'd been reading for a while, was it? Before
yes.
So how did that feel when you managed to get to see your name in that and see your articles and your work in there?
Yeah. Really, really good, yeah. And especially the first one, you put my picture in, when they have the contents page, they have like 3 pictures of people included, and that was in there, and I really felt like I was somebody then.
yeah, it's great. So in terms of, we're now on the subject of Writing Magazine and other writers. I mentioned it in the intro a little bit, but I know that you run, or you help to run, you co-run the weekly Tweet Up, or however you want to describe it, but writing chat. Yeah.
That happened with Maria Smith. She just tweeted something about, I think she'd just seen that every tweet she'd seen was, buy my book, my book. And she said, I came in here to talk to writers and there's nobody here. And I said, well, I'm here, I'll talk to you. Obviously, we were following each other and had interacted a bit. And we just started saying, well, maybe other people feel like that, we'll start it. So we did it. We had, writing chat as the hashtag. We do it Wednesdays, and we do it 8 till 9. And different topics, and quite a few people joined. And then after a couple of weeks, Carol Bevitt was joining in, and we persuaded her to join as well. So there's 3 of us host it now. But it was just a way for writers to chat about writing and share some ideas and tips without just constantly buy my book. I know I'm trying to sell please buy my book. We're all trying to do it. But you need social media. There should be some social bit and a bit of a chat. And it's been really good. Sometimes it's just mad fun. We've all picked up ideas and things like that. But sometimes it's just nice to know somebody else feels the same way. You've got the same issues, things like that.
Yeah, definitely. And I think you're spot on. It's something that we've covered before in the show. Myself and Leah have talked about it. This idea about social media, and the bit that always gets missed off is social. And we've all had the experience where, you follow somebody and the first thing that happens is you get a automated direct tweet that says, buy my book. And if you think about it, if it was in a real world interaction and you just met somebody in the say, hi, I'm Patsy Collins, buy my book, you wouldn't do it. But it seems to be fine if you're doing it, if you're on Twitter or you're on Facebook or something. So I agree. I've taken part in writing chat a few times, and it's really good. It's a good way to meet other writers, pick up new followers, and find more interesting things to talk about, and build a network. And I think that's, as you say, the way to do it. I don't think anybody minds people promoting what they do and sharing links or linking through their blogs or whatever. That's fine, but there has to be some element of building a conversation, having a conversation and trying to build an actual meaningful network with people. And I think if you do that, then people will go and find out more about you and want to know what you're up to and your projects and things.
Yeah, exactly. And on writing chat, I'd just say absolutely anybody is welcome Wednesday evenings, but use the hashtag, then we'll find you and we'll be able to reply to you, because otherwise we won't know you're there.
Yeah, I'll put that in the show notes again. We have mentioned that before, but yeah, it's hashtag writing chat, and it's
one word.
Yeah, and it's 8 to 9
Wednesday evening.
Yeah, GMT, of course. If you're listening to this and you're not in the UK, then it's 8 to 9 Wednesdays GMT. But yeah, so tune in. It's really, really good. And you can always, if you can't take part in it during the time, you can always look back through the hashtag and see, just follow how the conversation went. I know you've done all sorts of different things about the beginnings and endings and writing markets and probably all sorts of different things. So it's really good, and it's usually fun as well. There's lots of humor and stuff, so that's really good.
If there's things that come up, people are talking about, or anybody likes to discuss, we try and program that in and put it in. But we also have, even if that week's topic, you might not know what the topic is if you haven't joined in, but you can still ask about other writing things. We have that as a guide, but it's for writers to talk about writing and meet other writers. So you can still come in and ask other questions.
Yeah,
some learning issue, and if it seems like a big topic, we'll schedule it for another week.
Yeah, definitely. So, just in terms of your kind of route to publication as regards your novels, you mentioned that you've got 4 published novels, but you've written more novels than that. So, what was, and you mentioned that first book, took quite a long time to put together and write. But what was your journey to publication? What was that? How did that come about?
Right, my first novel was published. I entered a novel writing competition. You've already gathered I'm keen on writing competitions. Mm-hmm. And the book obviously won. And that was published. The publisher's now gone out of business, and I am sure that is not as a result of publishing my book. So I've actually self-published published it now since they went out. But winning that competition, and there were hundreds, there were over 600 entries, I think. That really gave me a big boost, and I had a book signing in Waterstones and things. Again, I thought I was a big author. But that gave me a big boost, and but the publisher he went out of business, which tells you how good he was. So I've since decided to self-publish those. My novels, which is that works for me. It doesn't work for everybody. But.
Well, yeah, I was going to ask you about that. So obviously, from the sounds of it, you didn't have a particularly enjoyable long-term experience with the traditional route because of what happened with your publisher. But you have sort of seen both sides of it. So how do you find the independent publishing side of things? Because that's something that just seems to go from strength to strength.
Yeah, the best things about it, the worst things about it, it's easy and anyone can do it,
but it's easy and everyone can do it.
Yeah. I get a lot of feedback from my books, and I edit them, and I pay to have them proofread. Different people have different skills, and they need different types of help. But I wouldn't advise anyone to write it on their own without anybody else seeing it, and publish it themselves without anyone else seeing it. You need some feedback at some stage, and there aren't many of us that can write and edit and proofread and do blurbs and do the cover. There might be some that can do it, but I would advise people to get some feedback from someone who will tell them if it's not very good and needs some work.
How do you find the other side of it, the business side of it, if you like, and the promotion of it and stuff?
Awful, I hate it. I'm trying to get better. That's why I'm talking to you. I really like the short stories, because you write the short story, you send it in, and they either say no thank you or they pay you. Yeah. It's not so easy with the book, and it doesn't matter whether you're self-published or with a big publisher. Everybody has to do quite a lot of marketing themselves now, and you do have to do something. people won't buy your book because it's brilliant if they don't know it exists. So you have to do something to make people aware of the book, or they simply can't buy it.
I agree, and I think you hit the nail on the head when you said it doesn't really matter whether you're traditionally published or whether you're an independent author. It's the same both ways. I mean, I know we've obviously interviewed traditionally published and independent authors on here, but I've also had friends that are traditionally published, and they're finding it really, really hard because that's the other side of it that they're having to get to grips with, is the social media side of it, and the promoting it. I mean, and some of these people have never, they've never had a Facebook page or a Twitter page, and they've suddenly been told, well, if we're going to publish you, then you need to have that, and this whole thing about platform and all this that people talk about, and it is a really steep learning curve, isn't it?
It is, and I think that's where a lot of the buy my book posts come from, because people have only got the social media because they've been told they have to sell a book, so that's what they're trying to do on it.
Yeah, absolutely. So what are you working on at the moment? What's in the pipeline for you, both in terms of short stories, and have you got any more novels on the go or anything?
Yeah, I have. I've got 3 different novels on the go that I might finish. The first novel that I had published was set on a farm. I actually grew up on a farm, which is handy for research. So I've been working on another one set on a farm with lots of horses. Somebody does horse-drawn weddings and things like that. So it's all very romantic and lovely. Mm-hmm. But I sort of came to a halt on that. But I've just got back into it. I've released quite a lot of short story collections, but I'm going to do, I've done quite a few stories with the same characters, so I'm going to rework some of those and turn those into a novel, so link the different stories together into a longer project. And also I mentioned that I'm keen on camper vanning.
Yeah.
I've half written a novel about some camper vanners. But I need to do lots more research, obviously, near castles and beaches and things.
Oh yeah, that'll be nice. It's a nice reason, a nice excuse to get back out, I suppose. So do you find, if because you sound a little bit like I am sometimes, I tend to have more than one thing going at the same time, and I'm always torn because, again, you speak to people or you read books, and a lot of them say don't do that, some of them say no, that's fine. So because one of the things I'm attempting to do at the moment is to finish one thing before I move on to something else, or at least finish the draft before, and then leave it to sit before I go to do the edit, so I can go off and do something while I'm editing or whatever. But how do you find that? Would you some people class it as like a butterfly, don't they? You're flitting from one thing to another. Is that how you like to work?
I usually, although I said I've got 3 novels going, I'll only be actively working on one at a time, and I will write short stories at the same time, because they're what bring in the money, really, more reliably. It takes a long time to write a novel.
Yeah.
But I will leave them at different stages, and if one becomes hard work, I think if you're really struggling to write it, there's either something wrong with it, that's maybe subconsciously you realise there's a problem, so you need to step back and do it, or maybe it's just not a very interesting story, which is why you're not interested. So again, you need to step back and find out what's wrong. So if something's engaging me, I'll work quite hard on it for quite a long time. If it's not, I'll just leave it and go on to something else. Because I'm fortunate, because I don't have a publisher breathing down my neck saying you must have this finished. I can, if I don't like one thing, I can write another. And also, I'm a real skiver. If I tell myself I should be writing a novel, and then I'll go and write a short story, I feel really pleased because I've snuck off doing the novel, but I've still done something. I've done something else. So I don't think it matters what you're doing as long as you're making progress.
I think you're right, and I think the thing that's a bit different for you, like as you say there, is the short stories are your bread and butter. That is basically what pays the way for you to be able to do your other stuff. So I suppose if you were, under contract to somebody, as you say, breathing down your neck, saying, "Where's the next novel? I need that by this date," or whatever. That would probably be different. That would probably, your focus would shift. But at the moment, it's the short stories that keep you going. And presumably as well, it's nice to just pop off, do something, keep yourself interested, and then go back onto the bigger project. Is it?
Yeah, it is. Because novels can and usually do take years, whereas a short story is. I have woken up with an idea, written the story in the day, and it's sent it off the next day. Usually I will leave it for a few days and come back to it. But when you start a new story, in a few days or a week you will have finished it, and that's a good feeling that you've finished something. Whereas if you only ever wrote novels, you would go for months and months and months without ever finishing something. And I think I would find that demoralising.
I agree. I think that's a good tip. I think that's a really, really good tip for people is keep yourself fresh by doing that. Just pop off and, write a couple of short stories to keep yourself interested. Loads of great tips and advice I think you can see there, and we've still got a couple more to come as well. But before that, I think it's time we take a break to hear our tweets of the week. Yay! Okay, yeah, I've got a couple of interesting ones this week. One of which was shared by, not shared by, it was from her actual blog and from her podcast, Joanna Penn, who often gets mentioned on here, the creative pen. And it was going further with audiobooks, and it was a conversation with J. Daniel Sawyer. And I just thought it'd be really useful, interesting for people to look at. A lot of people talk about independently publishing and everything else, but a lot of the time people don't, talk about all the different ways that you can sell your book. And obviously one of them is the audio rights, and she talks about, and the author that she's talking to as well talks about the fact that she signed away exclusive rights before, and she doesn't want to make that error again, and some different bits and pieces there. You can listen to it, but there's also a full transcript, which is good if you haven't got a chance to listen to it. You can just read the transcript, so that will be in the show notes. And also the Right Turn, which was at Right Turn Info, I think it is, yeah.
All right, yeah.
They shared one of their posts, which was writing through stress, tips to keep writing when life gets tough. So this was what
I need that one.
Exactly, this is what I was alluding to earlier on. And to be honest, it's lots of things that we've spoken about in the podcast before. In previous
stuff we know how to do then.
Well, yeah, it is, but it's reminders, and sometimes, like I say, I think it's easy to dish out the advice, but it's not always. It's not always that easy to actually take your own advice.
You got that right.
Or even remember it. So it's things like accept that it's just a low time, and that life comes in ebbs and flows, and sometimes we've got high energy and high productivity, and sometimes we don't, and you come into a slump, and that's fine. Take smaller sessions, which again we've talked about, and I know that's been successful for me in the past, where I just think, I'm just going to do 200 words or 300 words or 15 minutes or something. Make time for physical exercise, which again is something that we've touched on in the past. Just going for walks and different bits and pieces can really refresh you and keep your brain active and everything else. It talks about mindfulness. It talks about looking at past success, and creative scheduling and all sorts of different things. So that is, I really recommend that. So I will put that in the show notes. That's writing through stress. So yeah, so that's this week's tweet of the week. Okay, so before we finish up, let's just hear another couple of final tips from our special guest today, Patsy-Collins. Just as we're kind of rounding up now, what would be your kind of your tips? I know you've written a whole book of them, but like, what would be your main tips for somebody that's maybe they're a little way or on their writing journey, they're doing a bit of writing, but they're maybe worried about sending things out or where to go next? What would be your kind of main tips for aspiring writers?
Write stuff and send it out. Nobody's going to hack into your hard drive and read your stories and ask to buy them. You have to send them out to people. I know some people are really upset by the idea of getting rejection. So try writing competitions, anything, but keep sending stuff out. You have to do it. That's the only way anyone will read it. And if nobody reads it, there's not a lot of point writing it.
I agree. Yeah, that's really, really good advice. So I know you've got loads of more advice. Obviously, you've got your book out, which I mentioned before, which was From Story Idea to Reader, and that's available as a paperback and as an ebook as well, isn't it?
It is.
And where can people find some? We mentioned you've got a couple of blogs, so mention those for us, and also your website.
Yeah. The website is patsy-collins.uk. That's easy to remember. There's Patsy-Collins Blogspot, which is the one that has lots of competition links, nearly always free to enter competitions put up every week. And there's the Womagwriter blog that you'll find all the guidelines to all the magazines that take women's unsolicited women's fiction, and lots of interviews with writers and tips and things like that. Even some interviews from editors, and that's it.
Yeah, there's loads of interesting stuff on there, and as you say, loads of free competitions. So they haven't even got that excuse. They can't even have the excuse, well, I can't afford to enter it. So there's loads of free ones on there as well. Yeah,
and there've been loads that have come up recently. The 50-word stories. So you could have a go. You could write 50 words, send it off. It's worth a go, isn't it?
Definitely. So they need to go off, they need to have a listen to this, they need to go off, write those 50-word stories at the very least, and they should go on your blog and tell you that they've done it as well.
Yes, do. I loved it. Sometimes I get messages from people that have said they saw a competition on my blog, wouldn't have even thought of it before, and they've won it, and I'd won it, but if it's not me. So it is great to come across people that have done that.
That's really good.
I started that 15 years ago. I entered a 40-word story competition. The first thing I'd ever sent out. I won it, and I'm now a full-time writer. So it can be done. I
think that's a great comment to end on as well. That's really, really good. Okay, well, I'll make sure I put all those links in the show notes as well for people to reach out to you. They can also find you on Twitter. What's your Twitter handle, Patsy?
At Patsy-Collins.
That's fairly straightforward, and again, I'll put that in the show notes. That's brilliant. Well, thanks a million for your time. Really appreciate you talking to us. As I say, I can personally recommend the book because I'm already reading it and using it, and it's brilliant.
Oh, great.
And yeah, it's been really, really nice talking to you. Thanks a million.
Thank you.
Yeah, so that pretty much wraps up this week's show. Just obviously want to thank Patsy for being such a great guest. There's loads of information there, and I'll make sure that I put all the links in the show notes. There's obviously to Patsy's book, but also to the various different websites and things. And we'd also like to hear from you. We keep saying, but this is your show. The biggest favour you can do for us is to share the show with one other person or two other people or whatever it is. Join us on Facebook. We're trying to push the Facebook thing at the minute and trying to get a bit of a conversation going on there, and post more content. We can share more things and get a bit of a community going. So you can find us on Facebook at Joined Up Writing Podcast. You can find us on Twitter at JU Podcast, or on the web, joinedupwriting.co.uk. You can find me on Twitter at Mr. Kelly2U. Leah, you're on Twitter?
Certainly am. It's at Iliandra X Raven.
So it's been another Joined Up Writing podcast. So thanks for listening. Let's get joined up. I'm Wayne Kelly.
And I'm Leah Osborne.
Happy writing, and see you next time.
Bye, 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 bye.
Don't forget to subscribe on iTunes, follow on Twitter at JU Podcast, and go to joinedupwriting.co.uk. Let's get joined up!